We're great. What are your thoughts as you watch this come in?
Well, you and I were talking yesterday, of course, and I think I came up with a good way for me watching it last night. One question is, who's the losers, and what do they do? It's an extraordinary thing to think about. Jeb Bush, he raised $150 million, and he got, 2 or 3%. Huckabee even quit right during the broadcast last night. He announced he was suspending his campaign. So I actually think that's the most important thing in the next 10 days. New Hampshire will do it again, is who else gets out. Because 10% of the voters almost went to Carson. And you've got to think that those voters are not going to go evenly to, say, Trump and Cruz, right? They're going to go more. I don't know. I think you just got to don't know. So I think that's the big thing. But look, it was a great night for Rubio. A great night. That was a great night for Marco Rubio. And you saw he came to St. Louis about 2 years ago and did an event, and I was there, a very small group. He is as charismatic a guy as we have on our side. So that's fantastic. And I think Cruz proved that he has a model to grind out and get his guys there. And look, I think Trump, it was sort of a letdown, but a guy that's never been in politics and comes in second in Iowa, it's still, his expectations were higher, and he certainly, I don't think, wanted to come in second, but it's still somewhat extraordinary. So the race is on now, and I think it's clarifying into just 3 or 4, maybe 5 people by 10 days from now.
It is almost is going to be who drops out first, right? Because if a Kasich and a Paul and a Christie and a Fiorina drop out, that might help Rubio. But
and what's crazy about this, I just said to my wife, we were talking and having coffee. I kind of predicted this. I sat on the RNC for 2 years, the Republican National Committee, and I really understand the rules. And it's really designed to clear the field. Yesterday in Iowa, 150,000 people went to caucuses to vote, Republicans. And over the last 8 months, they spent $150 million. Think about that. Iowa's a nice place. It's important. But they just cleared the field effectively of everybody. And you have to wonder why. And the reason why is really not clear. Now, New Hampshire will have the same kind of honor. And as you say, how long can a Kasich stay in? How long? But here's the one question that's a wild card. What people really have to know, the reason to drop out is because if you don't, you end your career. If you drop out on a nice way, Huckabee got a TV program, Santorum got a book deal. You can't, if you're a political animal, a product of the scene, you have to get out in time to not be a spoiler. But Ben Carson doesn't care. He's not a spoiler. He's not someone who needs to get a book deal. And the same thing with Trump. And then Rand Paul has said he doesn't care either. So the question becomes, if these guys go longer than usual, does the 3-way become a 5-way, and how chaotic does it get? So it's certainly going to be wild to watch.
Also, you can speak to this better than anybody. Throw in Bernie Sanders, who is anti-establishment. Cruz is clearly anti-establishment. Trump and Carson. That is a large number of people. I know it's Iowa, and it's not indicative of the rest of the country, but a lot of people voted anti-establishment last night.
No. McGraw, maybe, you did it better than I did then. That's the takeaway. Half of the Democrats and more than half of the Republicans voted against the establishment. Or let's say more aggressive, more optimistically, they voted for candidates who are completely new or challenging the system. And that says something. If I was in a primary as a Republican, sort of moderate-looking, I'd be wondering if this is a wave, election against the establishment that's going to sweep some people out, like it did Eric Cantor and all. But the question, though, becomes, I have to say, it's a war of attrition. Bernie Sanders may think this is fun, and he may raise $1 million overnight. I don't know what the numbers are. But he's got to raise 60, 70, 80, 100 million to keep going, to compete on the radio airwaves on March 1st and March 8th. And that's where Cruz has an advantage of money, Trump has an advantage of money, and I think Rubio will. But the question becomes, how long can Bernie Sanders really hang on? When you're running ads in California on June 7th in 5 or 6 major media markets, it gets really expensive. And it's the beginning of a process, but it certainly is a rollicking one.
All right, let's talk Ted Cruz. He clearly won the evangelical vote last night. But there are people waking up this morning that says this is his moment in the sun, and he cannot get this support anywhere else down the road.
Well, it's true. My wife asked me last night, if you win Iowa, do you win the presidency? And President Huckabee won it in '08, and President Santorum won it in 2012. So I think you're right on that. But I will say this: what Ted Cruz's limitations are, I think he doesn't come across necessarily as charismatic. Sometimes he can be for independents, be a little harsh. He has made up for in sort of organization and discipline, and I don't think anybody will begrudge him and take that away. And I think you're going to see these polls move fast, and so with Trump up by 20-something in New Hampshire, that's going to shift dramatically. And the other thing is the psychology of that shift. If Trump goes from up 28 to up 5 or 10, how does he start to and his people start to feel about that? Does it start to be that there's a winner somewhere else, that you're shifting? And that's I don't know. I think Cruz has been very, very impressive. I think he does have some weaknesses that people see, but it's a great victory. I think that's really true.
I know Republicans want to hurt Hillary as much as possible, so they're trying to put wind into Bernie Sanders' sail to sort of get it jump-started. But this process, with the superdelegates already committed to Hillary Clinton, it's just inevitable that she ends up winning.
Yeah, I mean, and I actually really do like Ron Paul. I like him a lot. I met him. I know him. I really appreciate what he does. But when Ron Paul was gaining delegates and all, no one really thought he could win the nomination. And he won some places. He won some caucuses and all. And Bernie Sanders is actually an avowed socialist. He's 74 years old. He's had some positions on guns that are actually more conservative. I mean, and as you say, the delegates, Hillary is the nominee unless she's indicted. I mean, and I'm not teasing. I'm saying unless something else happens, she's the nominee. And Bernie Sanders is going to come into it. At a certain point, they're going to go to Bernie Sanders and say, this has been fun, Uncle Bernie, but it's time to go home. And if you keep this up, we're going to unload, Newt once told me, Newt Gingrich said, they spent $30 million after he won South Carolina to make him into a cartoon character of multi-marriages and all that. And he said that was, the pain of that. That's what Bernie Sanders is going to face if he doesn't go home sometime soon. It's Hillary, unless she has something major in the way. There's no doubt about it.
Bernie Sanders and Ted Cruz at least agree on trade, which I find interesting, right?
Well, and I do too. I hate to say it, I do too. I think, and so does Donald Trump. I mean, when I ran for Congress, McGraw, you remember the halcyon days of '09 and '10. I ran as a sort of anti-free trade Republican. I think the trade deals have been a disaster. One thing I hope the Republican Party will reset out of this cycle is something about trade. The trade deals have taken jobs. You don't have to be pro-union completely to be against the way the Chinese have cheated on trade deals, the way the Central American countries are able to cheat on trade deals. And we look around this state in Missouri, places like DeSoto, drive through DeSoto, you look around and you say, 20 years ago there was lots of jobs. I mean, it cannot be that every American is either cleaning a hotel room or a hotshot radio or a TV host or a lawyer or something. I mean, we've got to have middle-class manufacturing jobs. So I think that's a coming issue that I hope people will see both parties adjust to. I really do.
Ed Martin, president of the Eagle Forum, all-around good guy, friend of the show. Ed, be good, and we'll talk to you soon.
All right, McGraw, see you.
You got it. 727 here, Big 550, KTRS. We got numbers coming up next. Can I tell you?